On a stormy night, a little girl spots a wounded German shepherd crawling desperately through the rain. What happens next is a breathtaking story of courage, kindness, and second chances as the German shepherd's fight for survival inspires an entire community. If you believe in miracles and the incredible spirit of the German shepherd, you can't miss this video. Subscribe now for more powerful rescues and unforgettable German shepherd stories every week. The night the rain came down on Millfield, Oregon, it was the kind of storm that made the air hum with electricity and kept even the bravest souls inside. Lightning flashed through the old windows of the Collins house, casting quick, ghostly shapes on the worn wooden floors. Harper Collins, 36, sat hunched over the kitchen table, the ticking clock competing with the thunder. Her hands trembled just a little as she tried to focus on her work, pretending the storm didn't bother her. Across the hallway, her 5-year-old daughter Ruby hummed off-key, rearranging her stuffed animals along the edge of her bed, whispering secrets into their stitched ears. Outside, the world was a mess of mud, wind, and water. The yard lights flickered and then died, and Harper barely noticed. She was used to power outages, used to the isolation. As a trauma nurse, she'd learned to find calm in chaos, to hide her fear even when it twisted inside her chest. But tonight felt different. The air was too thick, the thunder too close, the sense of something about to happen too strong to ignore. Then, through the roar of the rain, came a desperate, ragged barking, not the yipping of a neighbor's terrier, or the bored howl of a dog left out too long. This was a sound ripped from the throat, urgent, guttural, pleading. Ruby froze in her room, her small face pressed to the glass, searching the darkness for the source. "Mom," she called out, voice quivering. "Did you hear that?" "There's a dog out there." Harper's heart stuttered. She remembered storms from her own childhood, a lost dog, a night much like this, the ache that had never quite left. But she shook her head, masking worry with practicality. "Ruby, it's just thunder. You stay inside, okay? Don't open the door." But Ruby's eyes were wide with a kind of knowing that only children have. The certainty that some cries must be answered no matter what. Before Harper could stop her, Ruby slipped her feet into her rain boots and vanished out the back door into the sheets of rain. Harper's pulse spiked. She rushed after her, out onto the porch where the cold slapped her skin and the rain soaked through her sweatshirt in seconds. In the yard, framed by lightning, Ruby knelt in the mud, her red raincoat slick and shining, her little arms wrapped around something limp and trembling. It was a German shepherd, big, soaked to the bone, his fur matted with blood and grime, his back legs twisted unnaturally beneath him. The dog's eyes, wild with fear, locked onto Ruby's face and something in him softened. Ruby whispered soft, trembling words, and the dog, in agony, lowered his head as if he understood. His body shivered violently, but his gaze never left hers. Harper's instincts warred inside her, terror for her daughter, fear of the strange dog, and, strangest of all, a wave of empathy for the suffering animal. She could see now the ugly wounds on the shepherd's legs, the way he struggled to even lift his head. There was something else, too, a thick leather collar around his neck, the tag bent and scratched but still clinging on. Harper squinted through the storm, reaching for Ruby with trembling hands. "Come here, sweetheart, please. Let me see the dog." Reluctantly, Ruby slid her arms from around the dog and stepped back. Harper knelt, feeling the dog's harsh, uneven breath against her wrist as she examined him. She turned the tag over and felt a chill crawl up her spine. The tag was stamped with a string of numbers and a name, just one word, and a second, much fainter message scratched into the metal. "If found, do not return, danger." Harper blinked rain from her eyes, confusion swirling with dread. She studied the wounds again. These weren't the result of an accident or a fight with another animal. No, the cuts were deliberate, too precise, too cruel. The dog whimpered, barely able to move, but when Ruby laid a gentle hand on his head, he closed his eyes and shuddered out a breath, as if comforted. Inside, Harper worked quickly. Old towels, the emergency kit, whatever she could find. She wrapped the dog in a blanket, ignoring the mess and the blood, and carried him inside with Ruby by her side. "Mom, don't call anyone," Ruby begged, her eyes pleading. "He's scared." He doesn't want to go back out there. As thunder rattled the house, Harper met her daughter's gaze and saw not just fear, but fierce determination. The storm outside raged on, but inside the small, dimly lit kitchen, something shifted, a strange new hope blooming in the midst of fear. Harper's own heart, battered and guarded for so long, cracked open just enough to let it in. They named the dog Thor after the god of thunder. And as Harper tended to his wounds under the flicker of candlelight, she realized that for the first time in years, she wasn't just surviving another night. She was choosing to fight for her daughter, for a broken animal, and maybe, just maybe, for herself. But as the rain hammered down and Thor trembled between life and death on the kitchen floor, Harper couldn't shake the feeling that the storm had only just begun. The kitchen was painted with blue-gray light, each flash of lightning briefly illuminating the scene. Ruby curled up on a worn blanket beside Thor, her tiny hand resting on his huge paw, refusing to move even as rainwater puddled around her boots. Thor lay shivering, ribs heaving, his eyes flitting between Ruby and Harper with a haunted awareness that unsettled Harper far more than any dog should. The storm still battered the roof, but inside it was the silence, heavy, raw, uncertain, that pressed hardest on Harper's nerves. She moved with careful urgency, cleaning Thor's wounds, her medical training at war with her mother's instincts. Every so often, her eyes flicked to the collar's cryptic tag on the table. She didn't want Ruby to see the word danger, but Ruby's gaze never left Thor. "Mom, he's scared of them," Ruby whispered. Her voice had that faraway, dreamy quality that always surfaced when she was lost in her imaginary worlds. But this was different. "The men in the black coats. He told me so." Harper's hands stilled. She glanced at Ruby, then at Thor, whose ears flattened at the words. For a moment, Harper said nothing, just watched her daughter's earnest, frightened face. "Ruby, dogs can't talk like people," she said, gentle but firm, hoping to ground them both. "He's hurt, honey. Sometimes when we're scared, we think—" But Ruby shook her head with stubborn certainty. "He really did. I can feel what he feels. He's in so much pain, but not just in his legs, in his heart. Please don't let anybody take him away, especially not the men with the black coats. He thinks they'll find him again." Her voice cracked, and she pressed her face against Thor's fur. The raw emotion in Ruby's words hit Harper with unexpected force, echoing wounds she'd buried years ago. She knelt, taking Ruby's free hand, but her mind was already leaping ahead. Animal control, the vet, the questions she'd have to answer. What if someone was looking for this dog? What if whoever hurt him came back? As if summoned by Harper's anxiety, her phone vibrated sharply against the counter. Harper almost didn't answer, but the screen flashed with a familiar name. Mark. She hesitated, then picked up, voice low. "Hello?" Mark's tone was clipped, impatient, and he didn't bother with small talk. "What's going on over there?" "Ruby called me. She said there's a hurt dog in your house and you're not answering my texts." Harper clenched her jaw, glancing at Ruby. "She's fine. I've got it under control." A sigh crackled through the phone. "Harper, you know the last thing we need is more chaos. You're not a vet, you—" "Mark, I said it's handled." Her voice was sharper than she intended, fear and guilt threading through her words. She didn't want him here, didn't want him to see her like this. Uncertain, vulnerable, clutching at hope in the shape of a battered animal. He muttered something about responsibility and safety, then hung up. Harper let out a slow breath, feeling her hands shake. She turned back to Ruby, who hadn't moved. Thunder crashed outside and Thor whimpered, shrinking into Ruby's arms. She stroked his ears, murmuring soft nonsense, words Harper couldn't quite catch, the way a child talks to a favorite doll or a secret friend. Harper's mind spun, memories bleeding in from decades ago. A dog she'd loved as a child, lost in a storm, her own mother's silence, the way grief carved secret channels inside you and left you wary of hope. She forced herself to focus on the present, on the broken dog and her determined daughter. "Ruby, I need to check Thor's collar again, okay?" Ruby nodded, not letting go. Harper examined the collar, running her fingers over the scratched tag, trying to make sense of the strange warnings and numbers. As she did, Ruby suddenly spoke, her voice low, shaking. "He said they kept him in a cold place. With cages, he remembers the sound of metal doors, the man with the black coat. He hit him, and he was so scared, Mom. That's why he ran. Harper stared at her, her blood running cold. Ruby? How do you know that? Ruby's eyes, too old for her small face, filled with tears. I just know. He showed me. She clutched Thor, who leaned into her as if her belief was the only warmth left in the world. Harper's mind reeled. This was more than a child's fantasy. Ruby had described wounds and terrors she couldn't possibly know. The bruises on Thor's ribs, the fear in his every movement, the tracking tag under his collar. It all fit. A burst of thunder rattled the window, and for a heartbeat the kitchen was a world apart. 3 lost souls huddled together, bound by invisible scars. Harper pulled Ruby into her lap, holding her and Thor at once. She searched for the right words, but all that came was the truth she'd spent years denying. Sometimes pain passes from parent to child, silent and invisible, and sometimes hope does too. As the storm eased, Harper made her decision. She wouldn't call animal control, not yet. She would trust Ruby's instincts, as wild as they seemed. She would protect this wounded creature, just as she'd once wished someone would protect her. In the half-light, Ruby's eyes glistened with fierce resolve. Thor's breath steadied, his head heavy in her lap. Harper knew the world would soon come crashing in. Questions, consequences, maybe even danger. But for tonight, she would hold her little family together, as the first whisper of something like faith stirred inside her. On the counter, the phone buzzed again, a silent threat, a promise that the past, like the storm, had not finished with them yet. The storm had spent itself by dawn, leaving Millfield quiet and washed clean. Gray clouds dragged across the sky, and the air smelled like wet pine and earth. But inside the Collins house, the night's shadows lingered. Thor lay stretched on the makeshift bed in the corner, his breathing shallow, eyes half closed but always tracking Ruby as she tiptoed around him, humming softly. The wounds on his legs were red and raw, the bruising along his ribs a map of cruelty. Even moving his head took effort. Harper watched her daughter, watched the way Ruby's hand moved gently over Thor's trembling body, watched how Thor's entire posture relaxed only when Ruby was close. It made no sense. She'd never seen anything like it, not even during her years in the ER, not with frightened children or traumatized patients. It was as if Thor recognized Ruby's soul and found, for the first time, some tiny flicker of safety. The phone call to Dr. Linda Tran was awkward, full of half-truths and careful omissions. Harper didn't mention the word abuse or the strange warnings on the tag. She just said the truth she could live with. We found a dog. He's hurt bad. I don't trust animal control. I trust you. Linda, sensing more in Harper's voice than the words revealed, agreed to meet them after hours at her small clinic on the edge of town. The drive was slow, the rain-soaked roads slick, the world outside the window blurred and dreamlike. Ruby sat in the back seat, Thor's huge head cradled in her lap. The dog whimpered once when Harper braked too hard, but Ruby whispered something and Thor grew quiet. It struck Harper then how desperately she wanted to protect this bond, not just for Thor's sake, but for Ruby's, and if she was honest, for her own. Linda met them at the back door, hair pulled into a messy ponytail, eyes sharp with worry. She ushered them inside, locking the door behind them. The clinic smelled of antiseptic and lavender. Harper helped Ruby carry Thor to an exam table and Linda began her work. What happened to him? Linda asked, examining the mangled legs, her brow furrowing. These breaks, they're not fresh, but they weren't set. He's got old injuries too. And these bruises, they're finger marks, Harper. Someone did this. Harper looked away. Ruby, perched on a stool beside the table, pressed her face against Thor's shoulder, silent and watchful. Linda turned to Harper. You want to tell me what's really going on? Harper hesitated, words sticky in her throat. I don't know everything. I just know he showed up last night and my daughter. She says he's afraid of men in black coats. She says he told her about cages and pain and... She trailed off, embarrassment rising, but Linda didn't laugh. She glanced at Ruby, then back at Harper, her face softening. Kids sometimes know things we can't explain, Linda said quietly. And dogs too. Linda injected Thor with a sedative, cleaned his wounds, and took x-rays. As she worked, Harper drifted in and out of memory. The stormy night when she was Ruby's age, the terror of losing her own dog, the shame of having never found him. That guilt was still a ghost in her life, coloring every decision, every act of caution masquerading as strength. It was Ruby who broke the silence, her voice small but certain. "He's not scared now, Dr. Linda. Not when we're here." Linda smiled at her. "That's because you're brave, Ruby. Dogs know who they can trust." As Linda stitched up Thor's deepest cuts, she palpated a strange lump near his shoulder. "There's something under the skin here," she said, frowning. She donned gloves and, after a quick injection of local anesthetic, made a small incision. Harper and Ruby watched, barely breathing. Linda extracted a small metal cylinder, a tracking device, slick with blood. Ruby tensed, her hands tightening in Thor's fur. Harper's mind flashed with dread. Someone had been keeping tabs on this dog, someone who might come looking. Linda scanned the microchip in Thor's neck. The information blinked onto the screen. "Well, this is a twist," Linda said softly. "His real name isn't Thor, it's Scout. He was reported stolen almost a year ago by the Blake family on the north side." Harper stared at the readout, confusion and relief and anxiety all tangled together. Ruby whispered, "Scout," and the dog's ears twitched as if he recognized the name from a half-remembered dream. Linda finished bandaging Thor, "Scout," and set up a pen in the back room. Ruby insisted on staying, so Harper sank into a vinyl chair, exhaustion catching up to her in a wave. As the clinic grew quiet, Linda sat beside Harper, voice gentle. "How does Ruby know so much about this dog? How did she know about the men in black coats?" Harper didn't answer at first. She didn't want to say the truth, that Ruby, like Harper herself, seemed to carry other people's pain, that her daughter's stubborn compassion was the thing Harper both admired most and feared most for her. She just watched Ruby, small but fierce, curled up beside Scout, her head on his side, their breathing in sync. Linda put a hand on Harper's shoulder. "He's safe tonight. Both of them are, but whoever did this will want him back. You need to be careful, Harp." Harper nodded, fighting tears. "I don't know if I can protect her," she whispered. "You're already doing it. And you're not alone." In the stillness, Harper let herself believe it, just for a moment. In the low light, Ruby traced the shape of Scout's ear, and the dog sighed in his sleep, a sound of pain, but also, just barely, of trust. As midnight deepened, Harper finally allowed herself to hope. The bond between her daughter and this wounded animal was real, unexplainable, and strong enough, maybe, to hold the darkness at bay. Night fell softly over Millfield, but inside Harper's house no one really slept. The hush was heavy, the air thick with worry and hope, and every creak of the old floorboards made Harper's heart jump. Scout, still Thor to Ruby, slept fitfully between Ruby's bed and the door, his battered body curled protectively in the narrow space, head resting where he could watch both hallway and window. Every so often he whimpered, paws twitching, as if chasing memories in his dreams. Ruby was awake long after Harper's soft goodnight. She watched Scout's chest rise and fall in the gloom, drawing comfort from his steady breath. In her small hands she clutched a half-done crayon drawing, a stick-figure family and a smiling dog, holding paws beneath a bright yellow sun. She'd drawn it after Harper's brief attempt to distract her with hot cocoa and a promise that tomorrow would be better. But tomorrow felt uncertain. Harper stood in the doorway, watching her daughter with an ache in her chest, thinking about the choices she'd made. She wanted to believe her house was a fortress, but the world outside felt jagged and sharp. The memory of Scout's wounds, the threat written on the tag, Ruby's haunted words, it all spun together until Harper wondered if she was foolish to hope they could simply outweight danger. She tried to sleep, but her mind was restless. When she gave up, she slipped out to the kitchen, phone in hand, curiosity and dread warring inside her. She typed "Blake family stolen dog Millfield" into the search bar, bracing herself for answers. It didn't take long to find them. Local news clippings, a desperate Facebook post with a photo of Scout, then younger, joyful, his fur gleaming and whole. A video from the Blakes, offering a reward. And buried in the comments, something else. Rumors of dog thefts all over the county. Talk of dog fights, abandoned barns, accusations swirling around powerful local men, businessmen, a city councilman, names Harper recognized from fundraisers and school events. A chill crawled up her spine. The more she read, the clearer it became. Scout's pain wasn't accidental, and there were others like him. Somewhere nearby, someone was profiting from animals' suffering, and no one was doing enough to stop it. Harper remembered the fear in Scout's eyes, the way he seemed to wake at every distant noise. She wondered who had failed him, and what kind of courage it would take to make things right. Sleep was impossible. Harper made tea, and as the kettle whistled, her phone buzzed. A message from Dr. Tran. Scout is stable. Call me if you notice fever, bleeding, or new pain. And Harp, be careful. The words didn't ease her anxiety, but they did ground her. She was not entirely alone. Upstairs, Ruby finally drifted off, her hand still curled in Scout's fur. But even her dreams were restless. Images flickered through her mind, cages stacked high, the smell of blood and fear, the distant sound of thunder. She saw Scout's memories, felt them even, like static in her bones. Men's shadows, black coats, harsh voices, and always somewhere on the horizon, a red barn, looming like a wound. Ruby woke with a cry. Harper was there in seconds, arms around her, rocking her gently as Scout roused and nudged her hand with his nose. "Just a dream, sweetie," Harper murmured, but Ruby's eyes were far away. "He remembers," Ruby whispered. "He remembers the red barn. That's where he was hurt. That's where the other dogs are." Her voice shook, and for a moment Harper felt the bottom drop out of the world. "I won't let anything happen to you," Harper said, a promise as fragile as morning fog. But Ruby only nodded, tracing her finger over the line of Scout's jaw. "We have to help the others, Mom. He wants us to." Daylight filtered gray through the curtains, but the house still felt shadowed. Harper called Dr. Tran, her voice barely above a whisper. "Linda, do you know anything about a red barn, somewhere out by the old farms?" There was a pause, a subtle intake of breath. "I've heard rumors. Years ago, some neighbors complained about noise out that way. Never proved anything. Why?" Harper hesitated, then told her everything, Ruby's dreams, Scout's fear, the research she'd found. Dr. Tran was silent for a moment. "Harp, this is bigger than you think. If there's a ring, if these are the same people, you need help. I know someone on the force, Jamie Porter, quiet but sharp. I'll reach out. And Harp, be careful, please." After the call, Harper returned to Ruby's room. The sun was rising, birds daring tentative songs outside, but Scout was restless, whining at the door. Harper opened it and watched as he limped to the window, nose pressed to the glass, ears straining. He let out a deep, mournful howl, so full of pain it seemed to shake the house itself. Ruby scrambled to his side, arms tight around his neck. "Is there another dog, Mom? He says someone needs help." Harper's skin prickled. She wanted to believe it was imagination, but Scout's urgency was undeniable. It was as if the walls themselves had grown too tight, as if danger and hope were both drawing closer. In the afternoon, with Scout finally asleep, Ruby drew picture after picture. Dogs caged, a family holding hands, a red barn against a stormy sky. Each line was heavy with a longing for rescue and for home. Harper hung the drawings on the fridge, a silent promise that she wouldn't turn away. That evening, Harper called Dr. Tran again, her voice steady. "I can't run. Not anymore. If Jamie can help, I'll do whatever it takes." As darkness fell, Scout roused and stood at the door, as if waiting. The three of them, woman, child, and broken dog, watched the night come down, hearts beating in uncertain hope. The house was no longer just a refuge. It was a promise, a fragile thread of faith pulling them into the unknown, where empathy and courage would be the only shields they had left. Thunder rolled in the distance as dusk settled over Millfield, tinting the sky a bruised purple. Harper moved quietly around the kitchen, trying to create the illusion of normalcy, peeling carrots for soup, loading dishes, though her mind pulsed with anxiety. Scout's wounds were healing, but his energy came in wary bursts. Sometimes he padded the hallway, nose to the door, tail rigid. Other times he lay at Ruby's feet, shivering when cars slowed outside or when voices drifted from the street. Ruby sensed it all, even when Harper tried to shield her. That night, Ruby clung to Scout's neck as she watched cartoons, her laughter brittle, her eyes flicking to the window whenever headlights flashed across the yard. It was nearly 9 when the doorbell rang. The sound sliced the air, making Scout jerk upright and growl, a deep, guttural sound Harper had never heard from him before. Harper glanced at Ruby, who froze, her hand trembling on Scout's fur. "Stay here," Harper whispered, voice tight. She moved to the door, peering through the peephole. On the porch, a tall man in a rain-spattered uniform stood beneath the porch light, cap pulled low. His face was sharp, unreadable, and his badge, Animal Control, gleamed beneath his coat. Harper opened the door a cautious inch, keeping her body between the stranger and her daughter. "Can I help you?" The man smiled thinly. "Evening, ma'am. I'm with County Animal Control. Got a tip about a large German Shepherd in distress at this address. Mind if I come in?" Harper's heartbeat stumbled. She recognized the badge, the uniform, but the unease in her gut only grew. Behind her, Scout growled low, his ears flattened, body braced as if he recognized the man. Ruby slipped from the couch, edging closer, her face pale. Harper forced a polite tone. "My daughter found a hurt dog, yes. He's recovering, under a vet's care." The man's eyes slid past her, scanning the room. "We just need to check him over, protocol. Some of these dogs, well, they can be dangerous. Might need to take him in, just for the safety of the community." Scout's growl grew louder, vibrating through the floor. Ruby stepped into the man's line of sight, standing squarely between him and Scout, her jaw set. "No," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "You can't take him. You're one of the men from his nightmares." Harper flinched at the words, panic rising. The man's mask slipped, just for a moment. Something cold and mean flickered in his eyes. "Little girl, this isn't your decision." But Harper had had enough. Her own voice, when it came, was ice-edged. "You'll need a warrant to take anything from this house, and I'll be calling the police, right now." The man's expression curdled. "No need for that. Just doing my job." He took a step back, then leaned in, voice pitched for her alone. "Some dogs are better off put down, you know. Safer for everyone." A chill ran down Harper's spine, but she held his gaze. "Leave, now, or I'll make that call." He hesitated, then with a grunt turned on his heel and disappeared into the night, muttering as he went. A white van idled at the curb, headlights off. The door slammed and the van rolled away, tires spitting gravel. For a long moment, Harper stood frozen, breath shallow. Ruby clung to Scout, who trembled but never broke eye contact with the door. Only when the van's lights vanished did Harper sink to her knees beside them, gathering them both in her arms. "It's okay." "He's gone." Ruby was shaking. "That's him, Mom. That's the one who hurt Scout. I saw his face in the dreams." She pressed her face into Scout's fur, and for the first time, Harper saw the tears spill down her cheeks. "He'll come back. He wants to hurt him again." Harper held her close, anger boiling inside her, a wild maternal fury that made her hands steady. "No one is taking Scout, not while I'm breathing." But the truth pressed at her. She was just one woman, alone in an old house with a frightened child and a wounded dog. The next morning, Harper called Dr. Tran, her voice hushed. "Linda, someone came last night. Animal Control," he said. But it wasn't right. He knew too much. Ruby recognized him from her dreams. Dr. Tran was silent, then said, "Don't stay at the house. Bring Scout here now." Harper didn't argue. She packed bags, grabbed Ruby's favorite stuffed animals, and drove through side streets to Dr. Tran's clinic. As they hurried inside, Dr. Tran met them with a worried frown. She examined Scout, then took the collar Harper had left on the counter. After a careful inspection, she frowned and produced a small screwdriver. With a twist, she pried open the thick buckle, revealing a hidden electronic bug nestled inside the leather. "Someone's been listening," Dr. Tran whispered, voice trembling. "You were being watched, Harp." Harper's mouth went dry. "How long?" "Long enough. And there's a GPS tracker, too. That's how they found you." Ruby sat on the floor, holding Scout, silent but steady. "He's scared, Dr. Tran. He thinks they're watching us right now." Harper's skin prickled with fear, but her resolve sharpened. We need help. We can't run forever. Dr. Tran nodded. I'll call Officer Jamie Porter. She's been tracking these men for months. She'll know what to do. But you have to be ready. It's not safe here anymore. For a moment, hope and dread braided together. Harper watched Ruby stroke Scout's head, the girl's face tight with courage and something older, something unbreakable. Scout leaned against Ruby, trembling but alive, and Harper realized that this was the heart of love, not the absence of fear, but the refusal to give in to it. As dusk fell again, the little family huddled in the back room of the clinic, listening for footsteps, hearts pounding. Outside, Millfield slept, unaware of the war raging in the shadows. But inside, Harper was no longer powerless. She would fight for her daughter, for Scout, and for every lost animal no one else would save. The night air in Millfield tasted of pine needles and coming frost. As Harper guided her battered Subaru along winding back roads, headlights off and hands gripping the wheel so tightly her knuckles burned, she felt the weight of every decision pressing down on her chest. Ruby was silent in the back seat, one arm around Scout, the other clutching her stuffed rabbit. Doctor. Tran rode shotgun, phone pressed to her ear as she relayed urgent instructions to Officer Jamie Porter, her voice low, clipped, laced with fear. The break-in had come so suddenly, Harper still felt the slam of adrenaline in her veins. 1 minute, they'd been safe in Dr. Tran's clinic, doors locked, curtains drawn, Harper reading Ruby a bedtime story while Scout dozed at her feet. The next, glass shattered in the storage room, a rush of footsteps, a sliver of black coat vanishing as Dr. Tran hit the panic button. Sirens far off, not nearly close enough. Harper didn't wait to see if it was Vince Wallace or some other shadow. She gathered Ruby and Scout and ran, Dr. Tran following close, her car keys trembling in her fist. They left the clinic behind, speeding through dark streets, hearts racing. We can't go back home, Harper said, voice hollow as she navigated muddy roads. Where do we go? My uncle's cabin, Dr. Tran answered, words snapping into place. No one knows about it. It's out in the woods, off the old logging road. We'll be safe there, at least for tonight. Ruby didn't speak, but when Harper glanced in the mirror, she saw a girl transformed by fear and love, eyes glistening and jaw set. She was cradling Scout's head, whispering things only he could hear. The German shepherd, still limping and bruised but alive, licked Ruby's hand, then let out a soft, mournful whine. They reached the cabin just before midnight. It was a squat, weathered structure at the end of a long dirt driveway, half swallowed by ferns and brambles. Harper cut the engine and listened. Nothing but the wind and the whisper of distant rain. Inside, the cabin was musty and cold but sturdy. Dr. Tran lit a fire. Ruby carried Scout's water bowl, and Harper locked every window and door. For the first time in days, Harper allowed herself to exhale. She leaned against the sink, staring at her shaking hands. I should have done something sooner, she whispered, the words clawing out on their own. I thought we could hide, but they keep finding us. Dr. Tran put a hand on Harper's shoulder. You did everything right. You protected Ruby and Scout. That's what matters now. Scout limped over, settling at Ruby's feet by the hearth. Ruby traced the lines of his scarred ear, humming softly. He knows the way, she said suddenly, voice dreamy, eyes unfocused. To the red barn, the one from his dreams. He remembers. There are other dogs there, lots of them. They're scared. Some are hurt really bad. Harper knelt beside her daughter, rubbing her back. How do you know that, sweetheart? Ruby didn't answer. She closed her eyes, pressing her cheek to Scout's fur. For a moment, the room filled with the snap and pop of firewood, the cold wind rattling the shutters, and the steady, wounded breath of the dog at the center of it all. Dr. Tran's phone buzzed. A text from Officer Jamie Porter. At the edge of the property. I have news. Don't open the door unless you hear my voice. Minutes later, a quiet knock. Harper peeked out and saw Jamie's silhouette, a young officer with rain-dark hair and a face that rarely showed fear. Jamie stepped inside, shedding her jacket. Her eyes took in the room, pausing on Scout and Ruby, then landed on Harper. They're watching the house and the clinic, Jamie said. You did the right thing by leaving. Vince Wallace and his crew. This isn't just animal abuse. They're tied to a dog-fighting ring. Corrupt money, maybe drugs. They've got friends in high places. Harper's throat tightened. What can we do? Jamie sat by the fire, lowering her voice. We need evidence, something solid enough to make it stick, even if these men have friends on the council. Ruby. She hesitated, glancing at the girl. Your daughter knows things she shouldn't. It's risky to use her testimony, but if Scout can lead us to that barn, we could save every animal there. We could end this. Ruby stroked Scout's fur, not looking up. He'll show us. He's not afraid, not with me. A heavy silence fell. Harper wanted to shield Ruby from every danger, but she also saw the iron in her daughter's spine, the way she squared her small shoulders. I won't let anything happen to her, Harper said, her voice trembling. But I can't turn away. Not when so many are suffering. Scout, as if sensing the gravity, struggled to his feet and limped to Ruby, laying his head in her lap. For the first time he wagged his tail, a slow, cautious thump against the floor. Jamie's eyes softened. That bond you have, she said, voice almost reverent. It's hope. The kind of hope that's contagious. We need that right now. Dr. Tran brewed tea, passing mugs around the fire. The four of them, woman, child, officer, and wounded dog, sat in a fragile circle, plans beginning to take shape. Outside, the forest pressed close, hiding them from prying eyes. As dawn crept up behind the trees, Ruby finally slept, Scout curled against her side. Harper lay awake, watching the way her daughter breathed in rhythm with the animal they'd risked everything to save. She still felt raw and exposed, terrified she couldn't protect either of them. But something had changed. The fear was still there, but it was lighter, braided now with purpose, and the first glimmer of true hope. They would follow Scout. They would find the red barn. And together, maybe, they would force the darkness into the light. A sharp, uncertain moon hung over the woods as Harper, Ruby, Dr. Tran, Officer Jamie, and Scout slipped from the cabin into the night. They moved quietly, their footsteps muffled by wet needles and moss, flashlights flickering between ancient trees. Scout limped ahead, nose to the ground, pausing only when Ruby's small hand steadied his shoulder. His scars gleamed pale in the moonlight, a living roadmap of pain and survival. Every few yards he glanced back at Ruby, searching her face for courage. Every time, she gave him a nod that was far braver than her trembling hands. Jamie led the way, pistol holstered at her side, eyes sweeping the shadows. She'd briefed them all before they left. We move fast, we keep together, and we don't take risks unless we have to. If we find evidence, pictures, video, witnesses, I call for backup. But if things go sideways, you run. Don't look back. Harper didn't need the warning. Her pulse thudded in her ears and she could barely keep her voice steady. She wanted nothing more than to grab Ruby and run as far from Millfield as possible. But when she looked at her daughter's face, set with that strange, glowing determination, she remembered the promise she'd made. No more running. The woods opened to a clearing choked with weeds. In its center loomed a barn, red paint peeled and faded, doors sagging on rusted hinges. A security light flickered high above, throwing crooked shadows across the mud. Parked beside the barn, half concealed, was the same white van Harper had seen outside her house. She sucked in a shaky breath. Scout stopped at the edge of the clearing, tail down, body shaking. Ruby crouched and wrapped her arms around his neck, whispering words no one else could hear. His ears perked. His breathing slowed. When he looked up, his eyes were steady, full of something like trust. Jamie signaled and they crept forward, hugging the shadows. As they neared the barn, the sound hit them, howls and whimpers. Dozens of desperate voices tangled together. Harper's skin prickled. Dr. Tran pressed a hand to her mouth, eyes wet. Scout stiffened, nose twitching wildly. He pulled free from Ruby and padded to the back door, sniffing, then pawing softly at the wood. Jamie eased the door open. The smell nearly knocked them all back. Blood, urine, sawdust, fear. Inside, the barn was lined with wire cages. Some held trembling pit bulls and German shepherds, others whimpering mutts. Every eye turned to the newcomers, wide and pleading. The floor was slick with filth. In the shadows, a battered blackboard listed names and numbers. Betting odds, Harper realized, and she wanted to scream. Dr. Tran moved to the nearest cage, falling to her knees. "Oh God! How many—" Jamie snapped photos, her jaw clenched tight. "We've got what we need, but we have to get them out." She raised her radio, whispering for backup. At that moment, a heavy boot crunched outside. Voices, harsh, laughing, too close. Vince Wallace's shout, unmistakable. "Get the dogs ready, boys. We got fresh meat tonight, maybe a bonus for whoever finds that shepherd." Harper froze. Footsteps thudded up the porch. Jamie hissed, "Hide, now!" Dr. Tran and Ruby ducked behind a stack of feed sacks, Scout pressed between them. Harper crouched beside a rusted tractor. Jamie, weapon drawn, melted into the shadows. The barn door slammed open. Vince and two men strode in, flashlights dancing. "I heard something," one said. "Check the cages." Scout tensed, body rigid. Ruby clung to his fur, her breath shallow, eyes locked on Vince's face. She recognized him, Harper realized, from the nightmares. Vince's gaze swept the barn. "There!" he barked, lunging for the back cages. Jamie sprang out, gun raised. "Police! Don't move!" Vince grinned, feral and wild. "Or what, officer? You'll shoot? Go ahead, but you can't save 'em all." The men fanned out, one grabbing Harper by the wrist. She jerked away, twisting hard, slamming his hand with a heavy length of chain. In the confusion, Dr. Tran shoved a feed sack off the pile, sending it tumbling into another man's legs. Scout lunged, barking. Pain slowed him, but rage gave him force. Vince spun, swinging a crowbar, but Scout dodged and snapped at his ankle. Ruby, pressed to the dirt, whispered, "You're strong, Scout. You can do it. You're not afraid, not anymore." Her voice, high and urgent, cut through the chaos. Scout, bleeding, drove Vince back. Jamie tackled another man, wrestling him to the ground, zip-tying his wrists. Dr. Tran kicked a second attacker in the knee, sending him crashing into a pile of crates. Harper seized the barn keys from a hook and tossed them to Dr. Tran. "Open the cages, get them out." The dogs, sensing hope, erupted into barking and frantic yelps. Dr. Tran and Ruby darted from cage to cage, unlocking latches, hands shaking, tears streaking Ruby's cheeks as grateful animals tumbled free. Harper called Scout, and he limped toward her, flanked by newly freed dogs. Vince cornered, spat blood and rage. "You think this ends it? You think you're heroes? We own this town." Jamie kept her gun steady. "Not tonight. Not ever again." Sirens sounded in the distance. Backup, at last. Vince lunged for Ruby, but Scout hurled himself in front of her, taking the blow with a strangled yelp. Ruby screamed. Harper dove forward, scooping Ruby and Scout into her arms. Jamie and Dr. Tran dragged Vince down, pinning him just as police stormed the barn. In the chaos that followed, flashing lights, cameras, the stink of terror and freedom, Harper realized how much they'd risked, how easily it could have gone wrong. But she also saw the truth, her daughter's courage, Scout's loyalty, the community's long-denied shame, all brought into the open at last. As the last dog limped out into the night, Ruby held Scout's battered head in her arms and whispered, "You're home. You're safe." "We did it." And as Harper gathered them both close, she knew the fight was far from over, but the dark had finally cracked. They'd found the red barn and set something unstoppable in motion. Dawn crept over Millfield, fragile and pale, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The barnyard was chaos, sirens blaring, headlights slicing the early mist, police officers weaving between rescue workers, news vans, and a crowd of neighbors who'd gathered at the edge of the old farm road, drawn by the spectacle and the rumors spreading like wildfire. Inside the battered barn, Harper stood near Ruby and Scout, the scent of sawdust and fear giving way to hope for the first time in days. Scout lay at Ruby's feet, tongue lolling, his wounds fresh but his eyes shining with something Harper hadn't seen before, a flicker of peace, a fragile sense that this time the nightmare really was ending. Officer Jamie Porter moved through the barn with an authority that made people listen. Her voice rang out as she directed officers to tag evidence, take statements, and calm the frightened dogs that cowered in clusters, sniffing the strange morning air. For once, Harper saw the town's stoic cop for what she was, not just a peacekeeper, but a force for justice that had been waiting for a reason to fight. Vince Wallace and his crew were cuffed in the mud, faces set in defiance. But Harper saw the cracks, Vince's hands trembling, the councilman beside him pale and sweating as the press snapped photos and microphones jostled for sound bites. For years, these men had moved in shadows, protected by silence and power. But now, under the unforgiving light, they looked suddenly small, almost ordinary. Ruby clung to Scout, shivering in her oversized raincoat, her hair matted with sweat and tears. Harper knelt beside her, wrapping both arms around them. "It's over," she whispered. "You're safe, I promise." Ruby's eyes were huge, still haunted. "What about the other dogs, Mom? What about the bad men?" Harper brushed hair from Ruby's cheek, her hands steady for the first time in what felt like forever. "They'll never hurt you again, or Scout, or anyone else." Outside, the news vans rolled tape. The people of Millfield, old men with muddy boots, mothers clutching their children, teenagers filming on their phones, stood silent as Officer Jamie led Vince, the councilman, and 3 others to waiting patrol cars. The dogs, each with a numbered tag and a makeshift leash, padded into daylight, blinking at freedom, many for the first time in their lives. The Blakes arrived in a rusted pickup, faces drawn, eyes searching. Harper recognized them from the news photos. Mrs. Blake with her long gray braid, Mr. Blake with heavy shoulders, and their 2 young sons clutching a faded picture of Scout. They rushed to Ruby and Scout, falling to their knees as they recognized their lost dog, Scout wagging his tail, licking their hands, the boys crying openly. "Scout! Oh my God, Scout!" Mrs. Blake sobbed, her arms around his battered neck. But as the family wept with joy, Scout turned to Ruby and licked her hand, pressing his head into her chest. The Blakes looked at Harper, understanding dawning in their eyes. "He loves her," Mr. Blake said quietly. "They both saved him." Harper's own tears blurred her vision as she hugged Ruby close, her heart breaking and healing all at once. Around them, the town, skeptical for so long, began to change. People offered blankets, old dog beds, casseroles. Some apologized to Jamie and Dr. Tran for not believing, for looking away. The anger that had fueled the storm was melting, replaced by shame and a fragile sense of community. In the flurry of police interviews, Jamie found Harper. "Ruby's testimony, your photos, the evidence in that barn, they're enough. We're charging everyone involved. The DA says there'll be indictments against the entire ring." Harper let the words settle, stunned by the finality. "It's really over?" Jamie nodded. "Because you didn't give up. Because Ruby wouldn't let you." She knelt, eye level with Ruby. "You're braver than most adults I know, kiddo." Ruby's smile was small, shy, but for the first time in days, it was real. That afternoon, the press conference unfolded in the park. The mayor, flanked by Jamie, Dr. Tran, and the Blakes, faced a sea of cameras. He spoke of community, of courage, of the need to end cruelty wherever it hides. Harper stood at the edge of the crowd, watching as the mayor handed a medal to Ruby, her face flushed with pride and embarrassment. "For bravery and compassion beyond her years," he said. "And for reminding us all what it means to stand up for what's right." Scout barked, tail thumping the grass, his wounds bandaged, eyes bright. Harper crouched beside him, feeling the weight of exhaustion and relief. For the first time since the storm, she let herself cry, tears for the dogs, for her daughter, for the years she'd spent hiding from pain and hope alike. In the hours that followed, as the sun cut through the lingering clouds, people lingered to help, building temporary pens for the rescued dogs, organizing donations, offering homes. The community, once silent and fractured, was finding its voice again. As dusk painted the sky gold and rose, Harper found herself surrounded by friends. Dr. Tran, Jamie, the Blakes, even neighbors she barely knew, each person changed by what they'd witnessed, each one a thread in a tapestry of healing that stretched far beyond the barn. Ruby fell asleep in Harper's lap, Scout's head in her arms. Jamie squeezed Harper's shoulder. "You did it, you all did. and we're not letting this town go back to silence." For the first time in years, Harper believed her. She looked at her daughter and the dog who'd saved them all, and she saw the truth. Healing, like storms, doesn't erase what came before. But sometimes it leaves the world cleaner, brighter, a place where hope can grow again. Sunlight poured through the open windows of the new animal sanctuary on the edge of Millfield, carrying the promise of a different kind of day. Where the old barn had been a prison, this place was alive with hope. A sprawling meadow where dogs ran free, shaded by towering maples and bordered by white fences that shone bright even in the late summer morning. Harper sat in the grass, knees drawn up, quietly watching the life that now pulsed through the yard. It had been only a few weeks since the rescue, but the world already seemed remade. The fear and urgency that once ruled every moment had faded to a gentle hum. The town, so long divided, silent, cautious, now rallied around the sanctuary, volunteering time, supplies, or just hands for petting and walks. The pain had not disappeared, but it was changing shape. Scout, still Thor to Ruby in her private heart, moved through the yard with a new confidence. His coat was fuller, the limp in his back legs barely noticeable now. He was gentle with the smallest and most fearful rescues, leading them out into the sun, nudging them toward bowls of water, or into the circle of children playing by the garden. Sometimes he would sit beside the gate, nose in the air, as if blessing every new arrival with silent encouragement. "You're safe now, it's over." Ruby was never far away. She played tag with other kids, her laughter carrying on the breeze. But whenever a frightened dog cowered in a corner or whimpered in a nightmare, she was there, soft voice and gentle hands, patient as sunlight. The grown-ups watched her and Scout, marveling at the understanding that flowed between them, something deeper than words. Harper let herself breathe in the peace. She remembered so many years spent armoring her heart, convinced that to survive she had to keep herself apart. She'd told herself that vulnerability was a weakness, that hope was dangerous, that letting others close would only end in pain. But as she watched her daughter run, hair wild, face bright, she realized how wrong she'd been. True strength wasn't about shutting out the world, it was about letting it in and finding the courage to heal, even when the old wounds still ached. Officer Jamie arrived, hat askew, boots muddy, waving at Harper as she crossed the field. She settled beside Harper, stretching her long legs. They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the rescue dogs tumble through the grass, tongues lolling, eyes bright. Jamie was the first to speak. "I used to think I couldn't change this town," she said, "that the silence was too thick, but all it took was one voice, one little act of courage, to break it open." Harper nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. It wasn't just one, though. It was Ruby. It was Scout. You. Dr. Tran. Even the Blakes when they decided to let Scout stay. "We built this together." Jamie smiled. "I've seen more change in the last few weeks than in all my years here. People coming out of the woodwork, confessing, helping, wanting to be part of something good." A small crowd gathered by the front gate. Parents, kids, the Blakes, local reporters. Harper stood, dusted herself off, and joined them. The mayor was there, holding a ribbon and a plaque. Today was the sanctuary's first open day, a celebration of survival and new beginnings. As the mayor spoke, Harper's mind drifted to all that had brought them here. The fear, the pain, the moments of near despair. She saw Ruby standing in front of the crowd, her hand on Scout's head, her chin lifted with shy pride. The mayor handed her the plaque, engraved with words Harper could barely read through her tears. "To those who listen, to those who act, to those who heal." When it was Harper's turn to speak, she stood for a long moment, the sun warm on her back, the community quiet around her. "Empathy alone isn't enough," she began. "What matters is what we do with it, the action it inspires. Every voice matters. When we listen, when we step up, even when it scares us, we end cycles of pain. This sanctuary, these animals, this day, they're proof that real change always starts small." She paused, searching for Ruby in the crowd. "Sometimes It's the children who remind us who we're meant to be. Their hearts cut through fear. Their sense of right and wrong wakes us up. She saw the Blakes in the front row, their hands resting on Scout's head. Mr. Blake met her eyes, and Harper felt the gratitude in his nod. Scout is part of our family now, she said. But more than that, he's part of this community, part of all of us who chose to stand up even when it was hard. Jamie joined her, adding, healing isn't about forgetting. It's about building something new from what remains and letting others in. As the applause faded, the sanctuary erupted into celebration. Dogs dashed between tables, children played games, music drifted over the grass. Harper hugged Ruby and Scout, her heart full, her fears easing. Mr. Blake approached, shaking Harper's hand, his voice rough. Thank you for loving him, for giving him, and all of us, a second chance. Harper squeezed his hand, tears shining. It was Ruby, really. She never gave up. As the day melted into evening, lanterns glowed in the trees and laughter filled the air. For the first time in a long time, Harper let herself believe that the past could be more than a burden. It could be the soil for something better. In the quiet that followed, Ruby curled against Scout under a picnic table, her eyes drifting closed. Harper watched her daughter sleep and knew that healing wasn't just for the animals. It was for the broken, weary parts inside every one of them. Tomorrow would come, with new challenges and new hurts. But tonight, surrounded by hope, Harper allowed herself this simple grace, to rest, to trust, and to believe in the power of beginning again. The sanctuary pulsed with the sound of life and laughter, a patchwork of families, children, and once broken dogs now romping in the late afternoon sun. Colorful banners fluttered above picnic tables, and the scent of fresh grass and barbecued sweet corn lingered in the air. For Millfield, this was more than a community fair. It was a celebration of survival, of change, and of what could happen when one act of courage rippled out to touch an entire town. Harper stood beneath a sprawling oak, watching Ruby run with Scout across the wide green. The dog's stride was easy now, his coat shining, the limp almost gone. Children raced with him, their laughter tripping through the field. In the crowd, former rescue dogs mingled, once timid pit bulls now licking toddlers' faces, a blind beagle sleeping peacefully in the lap of a local baker, old dogs and puppies all finding new families. A stage had been set up near the barn, draped in blue and white cloth. The mayor, smiling, adjusted the microphone and called the town together. We come today not just to celebrate Thor's Haven, but to remember what hope can do, to honor the people and animals who remind us that change is possible and that even the smallest voice can make a difference. He gestured for Harper, Ruby, and Scout to join him. Harper's stomach fluttered, but she reached for Ruby's hand and stepped forward, Scout pressing close on her other side. As the three climbed the steps, applause erupted. There were faces Harper knew well and others she'd never spoken to, but in this moment there was no line between them, just a single shared story. The mayor unveiled a bronze plaque. In honor of Ruby Collins, Harper Collins, Scout, and all those who choose kindness over fear, may this place be a beacon for every creature seeking home. As the cheers faded, Harper saw tears in more than a few eyes. Tough farmers, retired teachers, the Blakes, even Officer Jamie, wiping her face as if dust had blown in. There was laughter too, bright and genuine, and a ripple of pride as Ruby shyly waved to the crowd. Harper felt the last remnants of her old fear dissolve. She let herself smile freely, shoulders loosening, the joy deep and real. She knelt, pulling Ruby and Scout close. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. "You changed everything." The mayor passed the microphone to Harper. She took a breath, searching for words as the summer wind played with her hair. "Hope doesn't arrive by itself," she began, her voice steady but soft. "It's something we create, by reaching out, by standing up, by refusing to let cruelty be the last word. It's our responsibility to be the voice for those who can't speak, and to never look away from suffering." She looked at Scout, who gazed back with calm, golden eyes. Scout was lost and hurting. Ruby saw something in him that the world tried to ignore. She listened. She acted. and that changed all our lives. I hope we never forget that even small acts, compassion, courage, a willingness to do what's right, can become something bigger than any one of us. The applause was thunderous. Doctor Tran called out, "To Ruby and Scout, the bravest pair I know." Someone else shouted, "To Harper for never giving up." There were cheers and even a few barks from the dogs, as if they understood. Officer Jamie stepped onto the stage, standing shoulder to shoulder with Harper. "This sanctuary is proof of what we can do when we work together. Thor's Haven will always need volunteers. If you want to help, come talk to us. If you need a second chance, this is the place to find it." As the formalities ended, families fanned out across the field. Games resumed. Old friends reunited. Some neighbors, once wary and distant, now offered Harper casseroles or simply a smile. A few whispered their own stories of regret or loss, grateful for a space where such things could be spoken aloud. As the sun dipped toward the trees, Harper watched Ruby and Scout playing, silhouetted in golden light. For a moment the world stilled, a scene both ordinary and extraordinary. The girl and her dog running together, neither haunted by the past, but racing toward a future open and bright. People lingered long after dusk, lanterns glowing along the fence, music lilting from a neighbor's guitar. The sanctuary felt less like a place and more like a promise. The plaque at the entrance caught the fading light. Thor's Haven, where healing begins. Harper gathered her daughter and Scout, sitting together under the oak as fireflies drifted above. She wrapped an arm around Ruby, feeling the steady heartbeat of the dog who had led them all here. "You know what the best thing about hope is?" she asked. "It's catching. It spreads from one heart to another, just like you did, kiddo." Ruby leaned her head against Harper's shoulder, eyes sleepy but shining. "Do you think everyone will remember what Scout did?" "I think they already do," Harper answered. "And every time someone's kind, every time they listen or help or open their door, that's Scout's legacy." "That's yours too." Harper looked out at the faces, so many, so different, united by what they had overcome. She spoke one last time, her voice low but strong. "If this story touched you, leave a paw print in the comments, or share how someone's compassion changed your life. And if you want to hear more true stories of hope, resilience, and the power of standing together, even when it's hard, subscribe and stay with us. You're part of this story too." As the final notes of music faded, Harper watched Ruby and Scout race into the twilight, free, laughing, whole. For the first time in years, her heart was unburdened, her fears eased. Around her, the whole community celebrated not just an ending, but a beginning, the promise that kindness, once spoken, can never be silenced.